I miss Sam Mewis too,
Yeah.
but she won't be back. And I didn't add her on my midfield roster for this because I think it's way too early in her recovery. There's players that you add to this roster that can get training time and training minutes when it's going to be beneficial for them and beneficial to the players around them. I don't think you bring in a Sam Mewis at this point because all she's going to be doing is rehabbing. And why travel her all the way to New Zealand when she can do that with her sports teams, her sports medicine teams right here in the United States where she is. But I think depending on when Sam Mewis gets back, we'll see her make her way back onto this roster. She's one of those veterans that brings that ability to the United States because she's been there and because she understands how to do that leadership role that she does so well.
I'm just, I'm with you 100%. I just, it's also just a different perspective right now when it comes to talking about the injured players who have been away from this roster pool. When it comes to talking about some of the players who might be making their return to this team in 2023, there's been different conversations and there's been different information when it comes to players and their timelines. So we've heard, like, for example, we've heard updates about somebody like Katerina Davidson. We've heard updates about, somebody like Katerina Macario, where we haven't necessarily heard a timeline or an update is with somebody like Sam Mewis. So because of that, I'm with you. I didn't have her listed in my midfields for this wish list as well. Now, if we're going like truly like shoot for the moon kind of wish list, like, 100% absolutely. If Sam Mewis is at a point right now to make a return to this midfield, 100%. Yeah, like I absolutely would love to see her in this as well. I would include Julie Ertz in this mix as well. There's a still like very loud, strong contingent of folks out there who are like, where's Julie Ertz? And the truth is like she has been on maternity leave. She's being a mom, settling with family, and there hasn't been too much of an update around Ertz in that capacity either. So we do know that she missed the entirety of 2021 with a knee injury and in NWSL and played in the Olympics and wasn't 100% in the Olympics and then continued, to miss out on the NWSL season and then started a family. And that's really the only update for somebody like an Ertz. So it's like we're looking at some of the names that we're maybe making a return on this wish list of ours, but it doesn't surprise me that you or I didn't have somebody like a Sam Mewis or Julie Ertz in this mix as well, just because of those lack of updates.
Right. I mean, there are a lack of updates just so we don't know what's happening with them. I can assure you that Vlatko Andonovski has talked to those players, right? He's told that to the media. He said that he's been in communication with them. And I also think that this January camp is a little bit different than January camps in the past. And that's another reason why this roster is going to be 26 or under, right? I mean, that's why we pick 26 player rosters because they are traveling to New Zealand. That's a big travel. They have 2 friendlies that they're playing. Last year, January camp, the United States didn't compete against anyone outside of their team training squad. So that would be a moment where you bring in some of these players that maybe don't even have a timeline to return to the pitch, but just to get them back in camp, get them around the team, keep them within the United States. So I think the difference in a 2022 January camp where it was inter squad training only, no friendlies, no real travel, no travel outside the United States, you can have a little bit more freedom as a coach to bring in players that aren't going to see any time. Whereas this one, you're in preparation for a World Cup. You're traveling to the host nation of the World Cup and you're competing in 2 friendlies. You have to make some of those tough decisions when it comes to that. And I mean, not including Sam Mewis, not including Ertz, I'd love to see him there. I'm sure everyone would love to see them there, including Vlatko Andonovski, but it's not realistic to put them on this type of roster.
Is there anyone like missing amongst our list that you're just like, we still can make a case for them or we could close that chapter?
Right. I mean, I think honestly, Mace, you made a really good point to add Mace to that defender crew. This is someone that had gotten time. But like it depending on how we see some of these other defenders come back into form, Kelly O'Hara, Tierna Davidson, Emily Sonnet, I just don't think there's going to be room for Haley Mace 6 months down the road when we're talking about the finalized World Cup roster. Some people in our chat are giving shout outs to Ashley Hatch. I don't foresee her making her way back onto this roster unless something spectacular happens that she's able to prove herself. But this is a player that kind of trailed off in 2022 with the club season. I mean, you go from 2021 Golden Boot winner and Ashley Hatch, NWSL champion. She was making a name for herself, but I think her style of play is similar to that of Alex Morgan's, and Alex Morgan proved herself last year that she knows what she's doing in that role and that it's hers, and now it's hers to be taken from her in that sense. But otherwise, I don't see anyone else that is glaring or that we're missing. There are definitely a few players that are still making their way back from injury. How we'll see them come back into the fray of things. I mean, Casey Kruger out on maternity leave. I don't foresee her coming back into this roster. But anyone else for you that you think of?
Yeah, I definitely thought of Casey Kruger. She was one of those players. She's one of those players that I'm curious about because she's a player who has been specifically named by Vlatko Andonovski in some of these 2022 press conferences and media availabilities as that very long list of injured players or players who were out on maternity leave continue to sort of make their way back to this player pool ahead of the World Cup. So because she's someone that he has specifically named, because she's someone that he clearly rates, in terms, as a defender amongst the pool of players, she's someone that he took with the team to the Olympics. So I'm curious if this is one of those players that might get called into a January camp, and maybe we see one of the kind of next gen players kind of make their exit as well. I think that's something that we're going to be keeping an eye on. We've talked about how some of these more experienced and veteran players, as they continue to make their return from something like maternity leave or an injury, who is getting woven in and who essentially is getting woven out. Thank you for your service. We will revisit this, kind of post World Cup. What's that going to look like? What that's going to happen? I just feel like as we get closer to the World Cup, as more of these experienced and veteran players continue to get healthy and have an opportunity to get woven back into camps with this team, that picture will become more and more clear.
Right.
And just based on previous history of this team, no matter who's been head coach, if your experienced and veteran players are healthy and able, they have often gotten the nod to go to a large international tournament over the younger and up-and-coming player. And I don't foresee that changing with this coaching staff ahead of this particular World Cup, especially in light of the way and how they ended their 2022. So if you're telling me that there's a possibility that there's still room on this roster for some of these players who are still in the pool and they have a shot at the World Cup, I would agree. And I would include Casey Kruger in that mix as well, over somebody like a Mace or somebody like a Fox. I think we saw a most recent example of that.
I don't see her taking Fox's place. I think
Well,
Emily Fox.
I'm just saying that nothing's going to shock me at this point in 2023. That's all I'm saying. Nothing is going to surprise me. I already got that all out of the way, like back in 2019. And that's like the most recent example that I can remember. I mean, we had even then a Kruger who had been with the team in the build-up to a World Cup for about 2 years. And then I think Ellie Krieger was involved in one camp or possibly 2 camps, or it was 2 friendlies in one camp, but I believe it was against Belgium. And then all of a sudden there was a World Cup roster that was announced, and Casey Kruger was not on that roster, and Ellie Krieger was.
Yeah.
So I just think, like, again, as you get closer and closer to a World Cup, no matter who is in that head coaching position, if there's an opportunity to have your experienced multi-World Cup winning, sort of veteran-esque players, that they will be chosen perhaps over some other candidates. And I'm very curious as to see how this January camp goes and how She Believes Cup goes as well. Because I really think the combination, this back-to-back kind of window of opportunity, and what that's going to look like for this coaching staff and how they're putting together their rosters.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the names that have been thrown out in the last year are drastically different. And I don't foresee them changing too much between now and July when the World Cup roster is going to be released. But you look back to the 2022 January camp roster, Aubrey Kingsbury was on that. That was the first time we saw Alyssa Nair back after her Olympics injury. That was her first U.S. women's national team camp back. We saw Amani Dorsey on that roster. We had Jalen Howell on that roster, Margaret Purse. And then there was some movement after the roster had been initially announced that Morgan Gautrat and Morgan Weaver would be added to the January camp roster. Those are all names that really were short-lived on the national team throughout 2022. They got a few looks, and that was the point of the January camp. Bring in all of these players, see what they can do, have these inter squad competitions. But now it's coming back to, okay, can we build in a few more of these players that have been injured, get them game competition? I think Kristen Press is also a player that a lot of fans and people are looking at and circling and saying, when is she going to be returning from her ACL injury? She was reported to be just a little bit behind Katarina Macario in her recovery. So late February, early March for Kristen Press, but I don't think that warrants her being on this January camp roster. And even someone like a Morgan Weaver, Ashley Hatch, I just don't think that they proved themselves enough in 2022. And as you said, anything can change in the next couple of months, but I really foresee Vlatko Andonovski sticking consistently with the players that he has been using consistently while also adding in some of those players returning from injury.
Yeah, I am just really curious how this will look because it's being held in New Zealand. You know, this is supposed to mimic. This is going to mimic the World Cup group stage for them. They want to go through a 6-day mini camp and close out with 2 friendlies. It's a little bit different from previous January camps. They've been much bigger before in the past. They've been local. Obviously, they've been stateside. What is that going to look like for this team in 2023? I don't know if it'll be as big. It really might not be 26 players. Like
it could be 23. It could be 22, 23. Yeah.
So there could be even more players, you know, omitted from this list, this wish list that, you know, we just put together this. And this isn't like an ID camp, which sometimes we would see in December or the continuation of that in January.
The ID camps are massive rosters. I mean, we kind of saw a little glimpse of that with like Alyssa Thompson getting her first call up in November in those Germany friendlies. She's another player that like don't think we'll see her this year, right? Like after the World Cup, maybe you recircle a young player like that, see how you can build them into the mix. But I mean, who knows for now?
And I'm just like, if this is not a World Cup year, and this is like a different January camp, do we see a Carson Pickett back?
Yeah,
you know, in the mix. Do we see somebody like Alex Loera like in the mix here because of the rookie season that she had with the
from your mouth to Vlatko Andonovski's ears, Sandra. Let's get it.
Do we see the official in this camp if it's not a World Cup January camp? Me official closing out her 2022 as the leading goal scorer globally in women's soccer. 33 goals. Ranked highest by the International Federation of Football and History Statistics.
How is Vlatko Andonovski not looking at her, not talking to her, right? Like,
it's like how do we not include that player in the mix in this? And we're going off of recency. That's really what we're going off. What we've seen from this coaching staff.
We'll see. This is just our wish list.
If this is a regular January camp, is me official on your list?
Mine? Yes. Vlatko Andonovski's? I'm not sure.
I'm asking for yours.
Yeah, she is. I think she is. But my January camp may also be 28 players if it's just a regular January camp in the States, no competition. Yeah, I would even put Alyssa Thompson on there. You gave her a shout at the end of the year, put her on there. Yeah, Mia Fishel is on my thing. Get her into camp, see how she competes, see how she plays alongside Smith, Pugh, get her in there with Alex Morgan in training, see how she competes in this type of environment for sure.
Yeah. I think if it's a regular January camp where you can, you have it stateside, you have it with a couple of friendlies attached to it in an international window, I think you make sure that somebody like me officials on that list. But because of this type of January camp and what it's created and built to be, I don't anticipate that she'll be on it. But if this isn't a World Cup year, I want her in there.
Right.
100%.
I don't, yeah, like I don't foresee too many shakeups because it's a World Cup year and what January camp has been historically and what the coaches are looking for at this point when they call in these players. No. Maybe if there was like an ID camp in January, but again, we're still talking World Cup year. Like or in December, excuse me. We're still talking, this is preview for a World Cup year. I don't know if she's there.
I'm with you. Hopefully we'll get to see her there sooner rather than later. We'll see. Mia Watch continues for us at 8:03. Losing my voice, y'all. It's been an hour already, so that's about all you're gonna get out of me. But listen, it's a wish list. We're just making it up as we go. We're just trying to have a good time in 2023 in the 6-month build up to the World Cup. We'll see. We'll have to do the next episode when the official roster drops. We'll talk about who's on there, who got left off. We'll talk about if we made any correct predictions in either of our wish list. Who knows? Stay tuned. It'll likely be dropping very, very soon. Thank you all joining us this morning on Attacking Third. We appreciate you as always. Apologies once more for the voice. Make sure you download, follow, listen to 8-3 anywhere you get your podcast. You can watch us, subscribe to us on YouTube. You can get alerts for whenever we go live, youtube.com/attacking third. Like, follow, subscribe, leave those comments. We want to hear from you. The NWSL draft is coming up next week. We're going to have previews, mock drafts, and so much more. So stay tuned. For Sandra, Herrera, and Lisa Roman, this was Attacking Third.